Shut up and sit down.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Fight for Liberty show. Tonight we have an awesome guest. Most of you probably know him. He's a multi-time presidential candidate. He is a Marine. He is also the host of his own show, Adam versus the Man. So please welcome the great Adam Kokesh. Adam, great to have you on the show.
Hey, David. Thanks so much for having me. It's an honor to join you all tonight. And well, you're drinking. I should be smoking or something. I don't know. I'm quasi legal here in the state of Arizona, but as your audience can probably tell, I am not in my normal home studio. You caught me tonight. I was out running errands in Flagstaff, and except for the roads, I can't really find a way to blame government for being late today. Although, or being late getting to the studio, being on time for this. Of course, respecting your schedule. But yeah, it's one of the nicest things about being a libertarian. If you're ever late for anything, I mean, we have found a way to blame government for everything. So
Oh, yeah.
you can blame government for the roads. So you can blame government roads for you being late. Although today I had too much fun shopping and running errands and taking care of my puppy, who might actually be making an appearance in the podcast tonight. So I am in my vehicle in a Best Buy parking lot, and it's just an amazing miracle of technology that we're still able to do this. But
Right.
since you're having a beer, I will at least have a symbolic toke with you this evening.
Cheers to that. I wish I was smoking right now. I'm actually waiting on a delivery. I smoked the last of my shit while I was working today.
Wait. Where do you live, David?
Well, originally I live in upstate New York / Brooklyn, but I am currently just outside of Oakland, California. We're petitioning to repeal the ban on flavored tobacco products.
Yeah.
So good time, making some money, promoting some freedom. Always a good combination.
Yeah, I was gonna say, well, if you're in California, you don't have to be like one of these primitive, prohibition states, like backwards. I mean, I don't want to say that California is less socialist or communist or fascist than New York, but at least in California, you don't have to wait for delivery. You can go to the store like a civilized person and buy weed at the store.
Well, I'm getting it from a service here, like on the legal side. I cannot believe how cheap it is here. I'm used to paying like normal like 200 an ounce or so. Then I went to other legal states where it's like 400 an ounce, and then I just put in an order for an ounce of like Blue Dream for 130.
That's what I'm smoking. Blue Dream. Holy
Nice.
shit! Are you buying an ounce at a time? Are you buying for your crew there, or is that like you smoke 2 joints in the morning, in the evening, in the afternoon habit?
I usually average about a half an ounce to an ounce a week or so.
You are not a cheap date. Holy shit! Like if I was trying to get you high, I would need like a week's supply of weed for me. Because you give me an 8, like I'll an 8th. If I go through an 8th in a week, that's a party week for me.
I've killed an 8 in 24 hours more times than I can count.
Oh man! Well, thank you for improving the market and making it so much cheaper for the rest of us to get high. I mean, for me, like it's all like so. This is another really cool thing about being a libertarian is how you get to see the future.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mean to brag, but I will for a minute here, because there are a couple things. One of the ways in which you can judge the effectiveness or the accuracy of your worldview is how good is it predicting the future.
Right.
If your worldview tells you that that the Green Party was going to win in 2016. Yeah, and your world. There's probably something wrong with your worldview. You need to check some premises. But the Trump Clinton, and I mean, I am not trying to say that I am any kind of Nostradamus or have any kind of predictive powers. And I'm very careful within my intellectual integrity to only speak to things that I know, to things that I know for certain. I'm not like to me, it really boggles my mind that we accept as any kind of intellectual authority people who just basically make shit up to fit their narrative as they go along and just try to get you to think that they know about stuff. To me, I value
the presidential debate last night.
I did not watch the presidential debate last night because I do not hate myself enough. It was enough to but let me congratulate the winner. The winner of last night's debate was clearly the American Military Industrial Congressional Corporate Banking Complex, and they made out very well by having the focus of the nation on this conversation as if what they're talking about matters, and none of the shady shit that those winners I mentioned are getting away with is important at all.
Yeah.
And the losers, my condolences to the American people.
Right. And Chris Wallace.
Yeah, right. Oh my gosh. But I do want to say, I did see enough. I saw a couple highlights. I read some reviews. I don't want to ignore it, but I genuinely don't want to watch it. And this is one of those times, like, you could pay me to. I'm not gonna say it, but you couldn't pay me enough to watch that duopoly press conference between Cheeto Jesus and the kid sniffer. But I genuinely don't want to watch it. I mean, you could pay me, like, you want to give me $100 to sit down and I mean, let's watch the 90-minute, not the 2-hour version with commercials, right? But no, you want to pay me. You probably have to pay me about $100 an hour, $150. I'll sit down and watch it with you. It's like, it's not a big deal. But if you say, Adam, watch it so that you know what's going on, fuck no. It's going to lower my IQ, make me feel bad about myself, and I can get the same benefit from reading a summary and watching a few minutes of highlight clips. I really don't need to subject myself to this. And part of this is, rationalization for the libertarian inclination here, which is they want you to watch this. Like, pay attention. Look at the monkey, and so don't look at the fucking monkey. And I know a lot of you can justify it as a libertarian and say, like, it's just 90 minutes of your time. Just watch it. It's interesting. Like, no.
It wasn't interesting. It was comical. I was talking because the only reason I watched it last night, I watched it online because I was working during. But the only reason I watched it was because it was on in the hotel room because my boss wanted to watch it. And I told the guys last night, I was like, this looks like the cutscenes between the wrestling matches on WWE. Like, that's the kind of just like, I'm better than you. No, I'm better than you.
The most boring parts of professional wrestling.
Right. It was comical though, because I was getting pretty wasted. I didn't get wasted, but I was feeling myself, got a little buzz on, smoked a little bit of weed. So I was just laughing my ass off.
There's only one appropriate drinking game for libertarians to play during the presidential debates that don't include the libertarian candidate. And it's every time someone mentions the word debate, you have to drink until you forget that there's a debate happening. Okay. and then you win. And if you play the game right, you win. And feel free to substitute cannabis for alcohol, or if you have another drug of choice. But I think the effect is clear. Better not watching it.
Yeah. So I like to usually start off the show. We're a little bit in.
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry, David. David, you have to let me finish. There are 2 points, and there we go. I got to turn the lights on and off. You got to give me two points to finish here before you move on. And one is, since you introduced me as a presidential candidate, I got to say, technically I was running for not president, to resign on day one on the platform of taking the federal government through a bankruptcy, a peaceful, orderly, responsible bankruptcy process that leaves us with 50 independent states and up to 562 sovereign nations, and the chance to take back our birthright and our freedom as Americans and say we don't need this central authority anymore, because it's for lots of reasons, but we don't have to convince people to agree with my view or your view. But hey, if it's localized, your vote matters more. You get more control. You want to be communist, you want to be socialist, you want to be fascist, you want to be an anarchist and opt out entirely in your own property. You get that when government is down at the community level, because a community is a voluntary group. And I'm going to say this, because I know I'm talking. We got a little inside baseball kind of audience here. Guess what? Minarchists and anarchists are both wrong, and they are not libertarian, because both of them are engaging in a central planning fallacy of government should just do this or government can't do any of these things. Government only needs to be voluntary to meet the libertarian standard of ethics. That's in the Libertarian Party platform. Now, to say if government is you play definition games, but when you see it this way, I don't mean to alienate my minarchist and anarchist brothers and sisters, comrades in the movement, but I think they should be open-minded enough to see this point, that being a voluntarist, embracing the core ethics as a libertarian, just being a libertarian without labels, fuck all the labels. If you believe in ethics because you believe in freedom, you're a libertarian. You don't need to be a left or a right or a green or a yellow or a purple or a homesteading or an anarchist. You're a fucking libertarian. And what that means is embracing that core ethics of self-ownership and the non-aggression principle. And if that's what you believe, then minarchy and anarchy are both wrong. You have to be willing to tell people you can have as much or as little government as you want, as long as it's voluntary, as long as you don't force it on anybody who doesn't want it. And that means localization is the way we bring that principle to reality. So the other thing is, I was going to brag. I told you I was going to brag, right? I don't do it a lot. For a presidential candidate. And I am running again in 24 on this platform. I'm happy, more than happy, that we have Jorgensen and Cohen, principal candidates. I can step aside and say, you know what, I'm a team player. I'm not going to run as an independent. They are the best chance for breaking through with the message of freedom right now. I support them 100%. But I'm going to start running whenever is right strategically for 2024 on the same platform, and hopefully the LP wants to help me make this offer to the American people of localization. But about bragging, I've been right about a lot lately. About COVID, about lockdowns, about consequences, about protests, about riots, about the fires in Oregon, about how they were going to handle the Breonna Taylor case. You know, so many things, mid to short term, and I still can't call this election. Trump, Biden, not going to call it. I don't know. Either. There's too many human factors and unknowns and people who could intervene and fuck with things one way or the other. Nope, not even going to try to call the 2020 election.
I don't blame you at all. People ask me on a daily basis, because, I've been now doing, face-to-face campaign work of some sort, whether it's petitioning or door knocking or canvassing, some kind of campaign work, basically for a year now. And the last couple of months, I get asked probably at least 20 times a day, oh, who do you think is going to win? Like, I have no earthly idea.
And that's deliberate. That is deliberate. The duopoly is engineered so that it's neck and neck. They deliberately, and it's in some ways foundationally engineered this way, but also in the way that the parties play into it, right? There's like an equilibrium that is found, where if they can win voters, they're both running to the center. They're both kind of competing for that majority within the framework of corporatism. And I like to tell people that Trump is a socialist, communist, fascist, and have them freak out and then prove it to them by their definitions. Like, you ask people,
much fun.
What's socialism? Oh, it's an economic system based on communal ownership of property. Well, we have and means of production and social functions, right? We have socialized retirement. We even call it social security. Infrastructure, subsidizing the oil and gas and automotive industry, a regulatory industry. We have the socialization of public safety in the police and law enforcement, dispute resolution in courts, and with defense, with the military. And this is socialized military. Yeah. And the founders of this country were against a standing army for this exact reason. The perversion of Americanism from the coup. If you're a constitutionalist, you have to be against the current constitution because it was the product of an illegal coup against the lawful constitution, which was the Articles of Confederation. I don't know if you want to get into the whole history, but if you don't know this,
that's a whole different ball game right there.
Okay, but communism. I did this today with a guest of mine. By the way, I'm live 5 days a week for 2 hours a day, 9 to 11 Pacific at AdamVersusTheMan.com. My guest today was Dean McCrae, independent media producer and fellow Micronation project guy. I'm seceding with my 10 acres of my property in Gardenia. We can get into that if you want. But
definitely
we played
later.
A game called. Oh, sorry.
I said definitely we'll get into that later for sure.
All right. So I played a game with Dean, Australia versus America, which is more communist. And we went down the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. And, I've done this before for the U.S. Mm-hmm. And we have, in the United States, all 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto at least partially engaged. And when we went through point by point, today I scored the U.S. as 8 out of 10 based on the 10 planks of the Communist Manifesto. Australia was 8.5 out of 10. And they got some bonus points for gun confiscation.
Right.
So you look at the United States, Trump is continuing all of these policies with fascism. And I will recognize that in a truly beautiful way, America has embraced an anti-racist spirit. And I don't mean anti-racism like I mean just the direct definition of that word. That we have really said and made it a part of our culture and taken pride in leading the world to a post-racial or a post-racism world. Let's just put it that way. And I'm not at all denying systemic racism or saying that there's any of that, but we don't really have that in our nationalism overtly. There's a covert element of Euro white nationalism in the United States, but it's not dominant. But it is fascism. It is fascism by every other element, and most importantly, Mussolini's definition, when he said that fascism should better be referred to as corporatism because it is the merging of corporations and the state. And how corporatist is America? Need I count the ways? I mean, even Trump buying portions of companies. Restaurants will close, but don't worry, they'll come back just with new owners. Everything that government does that touches corporate America, that benefits corporate America at the expense of individuals and small businesses is corporatism. And I'll just end my rant by pointing out one more thing that I'd like to think my platform and the general principles of localization solves in a way that most libertarians don't even address is that taxation is theft, which means that, now let's say we miss that point, but what the lefties are right about, that most libertarians miss, is how much the economic divide in the world today is the product of theft. It's the product of taxation. It's the product of fraud through the central bank, the Federal Reserve System. And if we as libertarians want to say that we care about justice, that we care about the natural law, we have to have a solution to that problem. When you look at over the last 6 months, Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, so many other billionaires have doubled their wealth. And you go, well, gee, what's the purpose of government? We're really not what does it tell you its purpose is? What's the real purpose of government? To keep the super rich getting richer while the rest of us get relatively poorer and keep stuck in wage slave jobs. 100% employment, fuck that. Humanity is at the point where we should be looking at 100% retirement, where work is optional for every human being on the planet. And that's how we unleash our potential. And that is what is being stolen from us by this system. Sorry. I got a little carried away there.
You're good. I think, a lot of libertarians hated people with the rhetoric similar to like Andrew Yang. But, almost everything that you said in the last 3 minutes, so as he said, we share a lot with that like proletariat left kind of movement.
We are denying the inherent virtuous populism of our own message when we fail to apply its principles consistently. And this came to me by going, I don't want to run for president, but people like my voice, people like my message, and they want me to run for president. What would I do? And there's a lot more to the backstory than that, and being challenged, like, what would you do if you were president? I actually had that platform idea first, but my only answer to that question is, I know I've watched Lord of the Rings, okay? When you give me the ring of power, the only thing you're supposed to do with it is put it in the goddamn fire. Okay, so if that's my premise, that the authority of the federal government as we know it today is illegitimate, how do I address this? And guess what? When you go look at this giant pile of wealth that the federal government itself is sitting on, the land, and this is my answer to Yang and the Yang gang about UBI, because that's what you're talking about, right? Is that their answer is, let's get a government allowance. My answer is no. Don't let government manage your birthright wealth for you and give you an allowance based on that and hope that it stays nice and uncorrupted. Bullshit. Take back your birthright. And in the United States, that's 50% of the land west of the Mississippi that the government owns. The federal, not governments, because state and local governments, you add it up, it's a lot more land. Just the federal government owns 50% of the acreage west of the Mississippi. So when dissolving the federal government, we get to say, no, we are taking it back as we liquidate the assets of the federal government. They're returned to every American. We issue every American 1,000 tokens of AmeriCoin or some equivalent mechanism. I would like to do it by cryptocurrency if this is the most practical, where every American gets a currency that is their claim to the assets of the federal government. And right away, guess what happens to the dollar? Ooh. I can't make good. I should have a really good sound effect for that, like the air, like woo. Yeah, but no, and even without that, the Micronations Project is my bottom-up way of achieving this, of showing people a way to alter their personal lives, to live more by these values, to not contribute to the evils of this system. But even just the issue of currency, if we stop using the dollar, it stops having value. If we could all switch over to Bitcoin or some other crypto or some gold or digital, and I'm not saying that like as a Luddite, let's get back to physically trading gold and silver. Obviously, any practical use of it would be a digitized, tokenized, secure means of exchanging gold with silver in a physical holding. But just whatever it is, and I don't pretend to be an expert here, and it's something like I think is beyond the realm of prediction because there's so many human fight elements to this. But overthrowing fiat currency is a critical step to moving humanity forward. And if we can kind of, I don't want to say trick Americans into doing it, because the coolest thing about my platform is it is really voluntary and it's a legitimate market service to say, I'm serving as the bankruptcy agent of the federal government, not a president wielding its authority, but on behalf of the majority shareholders, as we can best tell through the electoral system as the American people, they would like me to take control of these assets, to dissolve them under these terms, and we create a new certificate that functions as a currency that's more useful and valuable than the dollar. We don't have to tell people to stop using the dollar, but rich people are going to be shitting their pants.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I'm not an anarchist by like any stretch of the imagination, but I've always loved the fact that you kind of are, but you're the only person that I've ever heard with an actual plan of how like anarchy works. So like
it's because I'm not an anarchist either. I'm not. I'm really not. And I identified for a while as an anarcho-capitalist, and I don't mind really if people try to fit me into that label, but I have a huge problem with it because it describes outcomes. My framework, the ethical framework, when you put voluntarism, the ethics of liberty first, and that's the Rothbard book that woke me up, by the way, Ethics of Liberty. When you put that first, you realize that anarchy as in a stateless society is an outcome, and that you have to accept the possibility that people are going to choose a voluntary government.
Right.
And you can't, as an anarchist, go to them and say, oh, you can't call that a government. That's our word. And capitalism even is an outcome. And you could call it an umbrella descriptor of reality, but my framework and my policy in localization allows for voluntary socialism. And as libertarians, I hate to say this, but you got to at least wrap your mind around the idea that most families with children are essentially socialist units, right? You know, and that's a
more
good
communist unit,
but they're not coercive. They
right.
are not communist as a definition suggests a whole other regimentation, but socialist of acceptance of a communal ownership and practicality of property, and it's voluntary. It's totally voluntary, and to whatever extent people want to form communities that are voluntary, whether they call them socialist or capitalist or communist or just hippie communes or even ethno-states, which would be disgusting, but I don't. By the way, I'm half Jewish and half German, so I'm like genetically programmed to be racist against myself as much as possible. It's great. But yeah, so I get to tell all the great Jewish jokes and all the great German jokes. Like, I'm Jewish where it counts.
Perfect.
In the wallet. I'm not there either. Sorry, now I lost my train of thought there. But no, this idea of putting ethics first, of voluntarism, it gets us past what I think is a major limitation on our movement, because
right.
we have when we go to play politics. And this is where the anarchist-minarchist divide comes in. By the way, it's mostly a product of COINTELPRO. It's all bullshit. Don't buy it. The whole minarchist-anarchist thing, it's nonsense. Right. It's bullshit. Right. Just ignore those terms. They are meant to divide our movement by people who haven't. Look at who historically has driven the usage of those terms, and in a divisive way. I'm not being conspiratorial. It's just look who's doing it. But even when we play politics in the rubric of playing their game, oh, we're socially liberal and fiscally conservative. Well, no, we're not. We're socially libertarian and fiscally libertarian. Okay, that gets you halfway there. But if you're saying, give me the authority and I'll be a kinder, gentler tyrant with it.
Which is what I have a problem with, I watched probably about a third, maybe, of the presidential debates from the LP this year round.
I hope they were fun for you. I hope I was entertaining.
Most of them were pretty good. The only one that I watched, like, actually from beginning to end, was the first one that Amash was in. But the entire debate sounded the same or for most of you guys, not you, obviously, but for most of the group, the debates sound the same as the Democratic Party. Give me this ring of power and I will do with it all of these great things. Even, I love her to pieces, but Joe, even Gary Johnson, even like previous libertarians, people like Larry Sharp.
Hold on. I want to distinguish Joe and Hornberger and a handful of others I'm forgetting right now. There were a great group of candidates, and I'll grant you the point that the rhetoric becomes that.
Mm-hmm.
And this is why I have a merely strategic disagreement with Joe in policy and presentation and messaging, obviously, and it comes to sound like that, but I want to distinguish Joe Jorgensen and Spike Cohen especially as candidates who are making a legitimate offer to the American people to do their darndest with the constitutional power that they can be given through the presidency to transform the federal government into a voluntary institution. I don't think it's possible. I don't think it's realistic. I think the American people aren't going to have their attention piqued at all by this. Well, what does that mean? But hey, I'm going to dissolve the federal government, especially since last night. Like, my Twitter feed has been blowing up with other people quoting me in replies to people I've never heard of going, after last night's debate, I'm pretty sure we don't even need a president. And I'm like,
right.
And I understand even for the Libertarian Party to get on, like, I plan on writing a book over the next 2 or 3 years, probably called American Freedom: How to Liberate the U.S. from the Federal Government, and lay this out as a matter of policy. Most people, even in this message, and we're not getting into it. You and I tonight are having a broader conversation. But if you were interviewing me as a presidential candidate, what's your plan? People who took the time to listen to me do an interview about it for like an hour or two were like, wow, yeah, ooh. And, I won most of them over. A lot of them still wanted other things in a candidate. That's fine. But, when you hear me in a debate and 10 2-minute sound bites explaining instead of, hey, well, this is what I'm going to do about this, and this is what I think about this, and this, because you're playing this bullshit personality contest game where you're and that's the most important way. To your point, where you say it sounds like the Democrats or Republican debates, when they're essentially saying, vote for me because you will like me as a personality representing you. I will make you feel good about yourself. And that's not what I'm trying to say. Not at all.
And I mean, I definitely, I don't want to throw any shade at Jo Jorgensen. For the most part, she's running. She's great. She definitely, like you said, is by far the best option for the American people. But even some of her rhetoric, like "I'll end the drug war on day one by executive order."
Yeah,
that's not constitutional.
The drug war itself isn't constitutional in the first place. Okay. So
I agree.
Hold on.
But to say executive orders,
hold on. Constitutional. Now, I have issues with that word to begin with, but that's not where I'm going with this at all. Let me point out to you that none of your objections to any libertarian's plan of you can't do that because it's not constitutional. What was the last time we had a president who even pretended to follow the Constitution in a meaningful way? So the question is not, is it constitutional? It's will people and the machine accept it as policy? And I think ending the drug war on day one, if you run on that platform, I think the American people are ready for that. And you can do that by executive order. And there will be states, if you win on November and see, this is the nice localization that's built into the American system, right? If Jo Jorgensen is elected on the platform of ending the drug war on day one, states now have from November 3rd to January 20th to redo the drug war on their state level and customize it how they want it. And it's just the federal government's not going to be a part of it anymore. There might be some, missions that she's not able to stop from the DEA that are in progress, but she's going to be able to stop the prosecution. She's going to be able to. So, for president to end the drug war, if elected explicitly to do so, totally realistic.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think that it's unrealistic. One of the main things that drew me to the Libertarian Party to begin with, or just libertarianism, was the realization that both parties are just voting to try to shove their ideals down your throat for 4 years.
Right.
Like, that's basically what the two-party system is. And the more I got into the LP and met more libertarians, I noticed basically the same thing. A lot of people are still voting for someone like Jo to shove freedom down people's throats, which isn't always better.
That's
it's not a better mindset.
Yeah, I hope you see that you're really underscoring my point here. We have to get past the arrogance. Right. Not to say that you're an intellectual or an arrogant person, but there's a certain intellectual arrogance of being stuck on anarchy or minarchy.
Right. I mean, like I said earlier, I'm definitely not an anarchist. I get into arguments with them on a daily basis. When I ran for office last year, I had them all over all of my social media accounts calling me like evil and terrible and part of the problem for running for office. I'm sure you get the same.
Well, a little bit, but a lot of that's just COINTELPRO. If you don't know that they're trolls, paid trolls, infiltrators, just like the FBI had in the anti-war movement and the Black Panthers in the 60s and 70s, look up COINTELPRO. You got to ignore the haters, and there's a lot of that's really artificially driven for divisiveness within the libertarian movement. But David, on behalf of those anarchists, or the people like me, perhaps, who just want to live sovereign on my own 10 acres and have a constitutional proprietarian monarchy, would you ever dare, in your minarchist ideal state, use the force of the state to prevent us from seceding on our own land?
Me? Never. Of course not.
Exactly. Never. So your ethical framework and your concept of the state that you see as your transition that you want still allows for the truly individualist anarchists to live the way that they want and still yell and scream at you with all that autistic screeching and say, look, you minarchists over there in the cities are doing it wrong. I'm happier out here pooping in a bucket like Adam. But you can have that, and I think, again, we can argue strategy, but when you embrace those core ethics, these labels, anarchist and minarchist, are dumb, divisive, and unnecessary. And we should not only be pulling together to minimize the injustice of state coercion, and but also be working together towards solutions. And I think in that context, I would then humbly present localization and offering that through the Libertarian Party nomination for president, as opposed to playing their game and accepting the authority of this illegal document.
Yeah,
I should say unlawful, not illegal.
Yeah. I think to part of your point, my favorite debate to get into with like good friends of mine, like not like real debates, but just fun over a joint kind of debates, is especially for like super right wing or like super capitalist people. I love having the debate that ANCAPs cannot exist without allowing ANCOMs to exist. Like, you can't have anarcho-capitalism without being okay with the next town over being communist. And you can't have that. And I love arguing with people because I have so many friends that will challenge that statement. Because, no, communism is terrible, capitalism is the only way to go, blah, blah, blah. I was like, then you're clearly not an ANCAP because you're trying to force other people into your way of life. That's
you have to,
anything close to anarchy.
Basic market principle. Right. You have to give people the right to be wrong as long as they're not violating anybody else's rights. You have the right to start a shitty company. Trust me, I know. I've had a few failed businesses myself.
Same here.
And if you don't have the right to fail, you don't have the free market, and you have to allow for a free market in social organization services, if you would call it that.
Yeah. All right. So I have one kind of broad question for you that I've been toying with a couple of my former guests. Do you think that liberty and government can ever actually coexist?
The question is, I would simply rephrase it. Can government transition to a voluntary institution? And I want to answer that as yes and maybe, because I'm a huge, we could all get blown up by an asteroid tomorrow. You got to always acknowledge that caveat, but that's not what I'm talking about. More in analysis and sort of where this ends up with technology. First of all, I'm a big fan of Professor Steven Pinker's, I don't want to say of his overall, but his primary, most important work of proving that we are living in the most peaceful times in human history. And then that follows a very consistent trend of decline in violence. Now, I hugely disagree with his interpretations, but the proof in the data that he has brought together to show that make that very clear. And if you don't mind me taking a while to answer this question, like to go to the end of the hour, because this is a pretty big one, right? I see this progress as inherently connected to intelligent life itself. In fact, the nature not of just intelligent life, but life. Back to the level of multicellular organisms beat out single cellular organisms, all the way up to the point of human societies that cooperate and therefore have economic development and specialization of labor and commerce, as opposed to human societies that are always in conflict, are going to prosper and outcompete those. peaceful cooperation always produces more value. It always creates more value. And so there's this natural trend and continuation of this continuation. Now, how this manifests as government is one of these things we cannot predict. And there's a little thought exercise I like to lead libertarians through to answer the question, how do you measure the evil of government? Because it's not its size. A lot of us like to pretend that it's size, and it's kind of a bad proxy. Like, big government is bad, small government is good. And like, no, I can prove that that's wrong. And to people who don't think like us, that messaging doesn't resonate for this simple fact that I can show you in this thought exercise, okay? So the question is, would you rather live under a giant state, a huge government, financially, that employs over half of the population? However, it's almost entirely nonviolent in doing so. It exerts just enough coercion to maintain those monopolies on those functions that allow it to employ so many people. And it never violates civil rights. It just has that massive economic impact. But actually, I'm sorry, the impact's actually relatively small. Even though the government is huge and running so much of the economy, it allows market forces to be relevant enough that what it's producing is more or less what the market would provide anyway, right? So you see, you can have a big government that's not very vicious or destructive. So would you rather live under that government or a tiny government that only employs 1% of the population, but murders a million random people every day? Oh yeah, right. Give me the big nonviolent government versus the tiny, extremely violent government. And what that gives you is the answer to the question that the measure of the evil of government is not its size. And there's some other steps here, so forgive me in shorthand. But it's not its size, but how much it coercively, violently holds humanity back from our potential in capitalism. In capitalism, a world of true self-ownership, because capitalism is a system of ownership of the means of production. If you don't own yourself, it's not capitalism. If human ownership is not respected, it's not capitalism. And every time there's any violation of that, any even hint of slavery, we all live in a less vibrant, productive, and prosperous world as a result of that. We all suffer from humanity being held back from that potential of all capitalist free exchange, win-win by choice exchanges as opposed to win-lose coercive exchanges. And so the measure of government, understanding that, I think government is inevitably going to become much less and less and less and less destructive over time. I'm extremely confident in that. Like 90, not 100%. I won't pretend, but like in the realm of 99+% certainty that over the next, even within our lifetimes, we will experience a massive reduction in the viciousness of government. And I can prove that already looking back. Look at war. And again, this gets to Pinker's numbers. If it bleeds, it leads, right? Thomas Jefferson, a person who reads, he said, a man who reads newspapers, or a man who reads nothing is uninformed. A man who reads newspapers is ill-informed or misinformed, right? And that's the case if you read the news. And the news, and I know this because I cover the news every day, but part of what I do in deconstructing it is get past this mentality of this is what you need to be warned about and scared about today, and forget what I was warning you about tomorrow because I'm competing for your attention now in a 24-hour news cycle. And the mainstream media just doesn't even have that short, midterm, or long-term memory baked into the narrative that it presents that we all need to understand our world and the course of human events. And that's a big part of what I try to bring to my audience. And so to answer your question, to get to this, will we ever get to a world without government? A lot of this depends on technology. And this is the next big sidebar in answering your question, which gets us to, at what point are we uploading our brains into machines? But even well before that, we are already in the process of rendering government obsolete. And what I mean by that is not just, everybody's waking up, because that's a typical libertarian fantasy. And it's true. not as fast as we would think. And there's a more fundamental thing that most human beings, as pack animals, we are creatures of the herd. We want safety, security, food on the table. We want to ensure survival and reproduction. That's just bait. You know that
Right.
there's some freaks like you and me who go, hey, can we step out of the herd and look around and see if there are any cliffs we might be going off or greener pastures we could wander to? And if we have to wander off, to show people that we're willing to make that sacrifice and
Mhm.
take that risk ourselves. And if you don't know how many times I've been arrested, you don't know what kind of sacrifice we're talking about. But
Oh
there's
yeah.
a lot, there's so much I could even rant spiritually about what that represents. So with the technology, over the course of just the last 20 years, you can trace the exponential nature of computing power with Moore's law. The average computing power that a dollar can buy, the different ways, and I don't care. The details of this don't matter. There are people who are critics of Moore's law and say it doesn't hold. But the general trend of technology itself, how many years did
Mhm.
it take us with fire and the wheel to get to email, right?
Right.
And then how long did it take us to get from email to streaming video and fucking interviews like this by StreamYard ranting about this shit, right? You see the change that's happened in the last 2 years. How long did it take for that to happen before? 20 years. And before that, 200. And before that, 2,000. And before that, 20,000. And then you go, are you trying to say that the change of the last 2 years is going to happen in the next 2 months? Yeah,
Right.
something like that.
Yeah, just about.
And that experience, that acceleration of humanity, how that relates to the remnants, the vestigial organs of government, I don't want to predict that. But I do think at some point, if I had to guess, we get down to community-based government, and you have the ability to go in and out of systems. Like you're gonna have here. I've never thought of it in these terms, so bear with me because now I'm at the off the top of my head point of my answer. If we get to that point where we have the libertarian fantasy, one of them, of competing agencies, companies seeking voluntarily to get our business to fulfill the functions that are the legitimate, helpful functions of government today.
Mhm.
I think when we get to that world of superfluous wealth, when we all have personal servant robots, when labor is truly eliminated, all menial tasks go away. I think you're just going to be able to transition between giant overlapping layers of huge government that you don't even think of. That there's going to be dispute resolution services, in the sense that displace government courts, but it's just going to be, we have really, really good government everywhere and tons of it, and we don't even think of it as that because it's all voluntary systems. And it
Right.
could go that way, that before we get out of thinking of it as government, we transition to these beautiful voluntary systems. It could be that we get to statelessness, in a sort of truly anarcho-capitalist state first, and then out of that grows these systems, and we never use the word government to describe them again. So that's where I can't really answer your question. It's more,
Mhm.
do we call it government at that point?
That's a fair answer. I mean, I I like how detailed and intricate it was, but the to a base answer of, would we even call it government? Uh, I definitely probably not. Most of us
Yeah,
wouldn't see it
it'll
as
probably
government
just become
anymore.
irrelevant. Like healthcare. You need healthcare. You're gonna have, like, already it was in the news yesterday that they're trying out a jetpack for nurses, right? For medics. That
Hmm.
that and you go, wow, that's cool. That's the market demand for that technology. It's not so rich assholes can fly around next to airplanes. It's so that you can get a medic to someone who's injured, boom, 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 and save a life. Well, next thing you know, that thing's going to be a robot. And you're going to have robot doctors that just fly in with a surgical tent and do and you don't even go, like, going to the you need to rethink all of these presumptions. Just what's possible with this technology. Like, why don't we have flying cars? Why don't we have self-flying cars by now? Because government, you can, I know, we said we can blame everything on government, but no. And I'm not just getting this from watching the Jetsons. Like, you look at the suppression of technology, you look at the entrenchment of the oil, gas, and auto industries. It is absolutely sick how humanity is being held back by this mythology of status.
Oh, yeah.
But you just reimagine these things. Do you have to pay for health care when you have a bodysuit or a chip on your skin? I don't want that as long as government exists, because then there's a back door. But as soon as I don't have to worry about that, fucking beam me up, Scotty. I want that chip that monitors my blood chemistry and my nutritional level. I want something in my mouth that sucks molecules out of the sky and 3D molecular rearranges, 3D prints them into vitamins and perfect nourishment for my body. I want all of that, and I want to start making this point about weed, right? Like, to talk about something a little more optimistic that's right around the corner. When weed is legal, it'll be pretty soon thereafter. It'll be dropping out of the sky, and I know this is true because I want it. And what I mean is, there's going to be an app where you're going to be able to find mom and pop grows wherever you want. They're going to have numbers based on how many minutes it takes for a drone to get to you at your exact location from their exact location, and price list, and whatever weed you want will drop out of the sky in that many minutes. Like, and it's going to be true about Amazon, every consumer good imaginable, all of that. Like, and if not, you're going to be able to 3D print it in your garage. Like, and Elon Musk said recently we need to take over Mars. And for all the statist government money critiques of Elon Musk, I have huge appreciation for what he is doing, moving humanity forward. But
he's
like
selling flamethrowers. He won me over the moment he made flamethrowers go on like a thing you could actually buy. It was all over. Any kind of hate for Elon Musk gone right then and there. I wanted one of those.
There are plenty of things to genuinely dislike, like little things about Elon, but that's stupid personality picking apart. I'm not going to play that game.
I don't give a shit.
He's a great guy. He's a fun guy to listen to. But we could
pick each other apart in that way too. Like, it's not worth it.
Sure. But what is problematic about Elon Musk for society is his involvement with government and government money. And you go, well, if you want to be that guy in this day and age, how much do you blame Elon for playing the system and not challenging it? And I kind of want to blame him at this point. Like, dude, you've got enough money. You've got enough money, and you see this presidential shit show happening, and you don't, like, give me $1 million for a super PAC to have a competency or intelligence test between all three presidential candidates live at the National Press Club in DC. There's so many, even just off the top of my head, so many little things like that when you have that but he's going along and getting along and accepting that a huge chunk of even his personal wealth, let alone his operating wealth, comes from money stolen from the American people. And if he wants to play central planner and say, well, I'm going to invest this in technologies, it's going to make things better for everyone, I passionately, ethically disagree with that, but I kind of understand it, and I can still immensely respect the man and appreciate truly what he is achieving technologically for humanity. But I want it decentralized. You let me know. I'm gonna put me in a cryo chamber and wake me up when I can 3D print my own rocket ship in my backyard and fly to Mars and set up a little base there. You let me know, Elon, and I'll join you. And I'm all about this technology, but having it around, like I said, when government exists and they can put a backdoor on anything, that legit fucking scares me.
Oh yeah, same here for sure. There's a lot of things that technology can do. I even like targeted ads on social media. You know how the fact that my phone is always listening to me, and I can say, like, I can probably right now, because I've said your name 100 times today, talking about like just that I had this tonight. I'm sure if I type in Adam in Google right now, Kokesh is going to be the first thing to come up. And that's great sometimes. It's creepy as shit. But like sometimes it's helpful because sometimes you're Googling somebody that's not very well known and you don't know how to spell their last name and it comes up because Google's listening to you. Or like you're having a conversation about how you really need something and then it shows up in your ads on Facebook tomorrow.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah. No,
creepy and I don't
have you
like
seen
it.
The Social Dilemma?
The what?
The Social Dilemma.
No.
It's a relatively new documentary about social media. One of the most disturbing factoids, just to tease everybody on this: teenage girl suicides and preteen suicides. That's 14 to 18 and 10 to 14. There was already an issue with teen girl suicides in the 14 to 18 range. Girls 10 to 14 in America basically weren't committing suicide at all. I mean, you don't hear about that, like insignificant, right? Peer pressure, things like that would drive a young woman to suicide. And you can trace it to when social media became available on mobile devices. Suicide rates in both of those age groups skyrocketed proportionately, not exponentially. As in, they both were like preteen went from 0 to significant, and teen went from significant to that much more. I mean, it's disgusting. And when you talk about Google and Alexa and Facebook, these major tech companies that not only have an outsized role in our lives but power and influence, you can blame the government for that too. It's corporatism and intellectual property that has created this tech oligopoly, as opposed to a decentralized tech universe that we would have naturally and still do in many ways on the internet. The problem is these big companies are able to concentrate wealth and political power in a way that allows them to conglomerate and buy up competition or simply run them out of business. And Amazon, serious example with this. The big one was, I forget the name of the company that sold baby products. Amazon deliberately, it was an online website, and Amazon was competing with them in order to put them out of business. Amazon undercut them on everything that they carried on Amazon at a loss in order to put them out of business, then put the prices back up. And there's a certain amount of gaming that I'm okay with. I'm okay. Like I'm okay with legitimate capitalist competition. I'm not okay with fraud.
Right.
And I'm not okay with there being huge government barriers to actual competition that create friction in the market that would prevent that company from just coming right back as soon as Amazon, raises their prices back up, and that ruins the game for that little bit of manipulation. But this whole game goes away if you have government out of the market entirely, and that's really our goal, because government interventions in the market, by definition, are violations of individual property rights, and that's something that libertarians, we all let's just say have a problem with ethically.
Right. Yeah, I definitely, as far as like the everybody listening to you, I kind of go with what you were saying about as long as government exists, that shit scares me. But if it was just like the free market and like Alexa was doing what it was doing, and I didn't have to worry about the NSA also being part of that conversation, then I don't know how much of a problem I would have with it, because it makes your life better. It makes, like, targeted ads means that you only see the things that you want to see, which is genuinely a more enjoyable way to live.
Well, so I mean, I'm with you on the core point there. There's still one problem that you have to account for that you're not addressing, which is the true element of fraud that is being perpetrated. Like, my producer calls me calls me the most censored man on the internet, and that I have the most censored YouTube channel. I think it's shadow banning more than anything that we experience as libertarians. But if you look like, and the proof is in my numbers on YouTube, and I could get way into this and what we're getting paid or not getting paid, but just specifically,
luckily I'm not there yet. No, they don't know about me well enough to shadow ban me yet.
Well, I have about 250,000 subscribers, and my videos sometimes only get a couple hundred views. And you go, No, that's not how that's supposed to work. And now we've been putting out regular, consistent content for about 7 months, kind of since the start of Coronaphobia, and still shadow banned. So last week I did a video, or week before last, I did a video about coronavirus false positives, and that
I
got me
watched that
banned.
one.
That got me banned from YouTube for a week. But Facebook, the numbers are the same. Like, and I switched over to my personal page thinking, all right, at least I'll get a fair shake on my personal page. I still have 25,000 people following me on my personal page and 4,000 something friends. I can go live on Facebook, I'll get 10 viewers. And you go,
Right.
you know,
Well, we have campaign people in the Jorgensen campaign getting their Facebooks deleted and scrubbed right now. We have the entire LP is under attack on Facebook right now. And normally I hate like the kind of the whiny conspiracy theory side of like
yeah,
anti-establishment candidates. You know, I had similar problems with Tulsi Gabbard's campaign. Where sometimes it just got whiny about the things that people were doing. But like this is completely real. Like we have high-ranking people in Jorgensen's campaign and Cohen's campaigns, like getting their personal Facebooks deleted out of nowhere for no reason.
well, you know, one of the shitty things about this kind of censorship is it works even when it doesn't work. I think the bigger scam here is that their goal is to censor libertarians, and they're making it look like conservatives are the ones being censored, and that's the general mythology of mainstream censorship. There are a lot of problems with that. But if you shadow ban libertarians and censor a handful of conservatives, you can twist the narrative to say, oh, of course, yes, conservatives are being censored by liberal social media platform owners, and libertarians are just an afterthought. And I think that's a part of the bigger strategy. There is a fraud being committed by these social media websites when they say connect with these people and these are the terms of their platform, and then they apply them in very deceitful ways. And you can say, well, it was in the fine print, you should have read the fine print. Okay, there's an argument to be made there, but even with that, if it wasn't for government intellectual property and corporatism rackets, you would have competition, you would have honest alternatives, and eventually these things would be so marginally expensive to produce, like healthcare, like surgery tents with robot doctors dropping out of the sky if you get injured. Like that's the future of medicine we have, and that costing a negligible amount. Like that's what we're on the verge of humanity. This acceleration, we are instead of going exponential, we are going linear as the average human being, and that exponential growth potential, that's still there. That's what's being stolen from us by the superclass, and that's what libertarianism has the promise to take back. That's a big part of what what really excites me about this. That it's not just even fighting for justice and righteousness and what we're doing right now, but it really is, like I alluded to earlier, moving humanity forward on a spiritual level. And if we're going to end on a beautiful note like that, I also have to introduce you to my puppy, Marilyn. Marilyn, come here. Come say hi to everybody on the interwebs. Again, yes. This is our puppy, our princess. My wife and I, well, really my wife, adopted her. But now she gets to drive around with Marilyn. Are you being camera shy? Look, the camera's over there. This is my puppy, Marilyn.
Hello.
And we live at the Garden of Freedom, Gardenia, a soon-to-be sovereign nation. And if you want to be a part of this, we have kittens there too, and I definitely use them as props to win debates. But if you want to follow us, I'm building a lot of cool Earthship off-grid homes. We're living down 3 miles of private dirt road in the mountains of Arizona. Follow us on Instagram at the Garden of Freedom. If you want to follow my show, please check it out, adamversustheman.com. And on social media, man, you are hot shit on that as a producer. That's beautiful.
I got you.
I am active. The one place I'm really active in social media, like in the conversation. Oh, Marilyn's tired. She wants to go home. Oh, poor puppy. All right, it's Twitter, and you already had it up there, at Adam Kokesh on Twitter. That's it. That's how to connect with me. David, it's been a lot of fun. I appreciate
All
your
right.
time tonight.
Thank you so much for coming on.
I will say one other critical thing in closing, that what we are doing in independent media is critical to moving humanity forward right now. And if you're watching this, if you made it all the way to the end of the show, just know that neither of us has corporate sponsorship, and we depend on an active, engaged audience to compete at all with the mainstream. So please, if you appreciate this media, do what you can to support it, share it, support it financially, and put your money where your eyes and ears are, because we need you to do what we do too, right?
Amen to that. And so if you do want to donate, both of us are on patreon.com. Mine is /Fight for Liberty. Are you /Adam versus the Man?
Yep, that's us.
Okay. All right. So Patreon is so great, isn't it? It's helping a number of us get at least somewhat off of our feet. Definitely, again, thank you so much for coming on. It was a pleasure. Thank you, everybody, for watching, and we will see you again next week on the Fight for Liberty show.
Mwah, peace and love, y'all.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. Don't forget to click the like and subscribe buttons below. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Fight for Liberty, and support the channel at patreon.com/fightforliberty. And as always, keep up the fight.